This video is presented by mybookie.ag. What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC 254 this Saturday. A pretty solid card, really good fights all throughout it, but we gotta pay our respects to Islam Makhachev, because my man cannot get any fights to the cage. But there are really interesting prospects. Yoel Alvarez is a very interesting prospect. We did have Umar Nurmagomedov on the card, but he had to pull out as well. Nathaniel Wood versus Casey Kenny is an extremely interesting fight, but we are going to start with the rematch, and hopefully it comes together. We get to finally see it after it got scratched off the last time. Magomed Ankalaev versus Cutelaba 2. We saw the first fight, and even though it was one of the most controversial stoppages in UFC history, where Cutelaba was trying to play possum and he was faking being hurt, so Magomed Ankalaev, who's a counterpuncher, would come forward at him, run into one of his powerful right hands. In theory, the game plan worked. It did cause Ankalaev to get out of his counter-striking style and start looking for the knockout, throwing a lot of head kicks, throwing a lot of punches, and he almost got caught by a few big right overhands. So in theory, it did work. Cutelaba's game plan worked. He blocked every single kick, got hit by a couple of very short hooks as Ankalaev was getting in and out, but the ref may have completely destroyed Cutelaba's chances in the rematch, because looking at Cutelaba's skill set, his aggressive power punches, he doesn't set up things too well. He has pretty good leg kicks here and there. He's very athletic, and he's strong and powerful in every single position in the cage, anywhere in the striking range, anywhere in the clinch, anywhere on the ground. But because of his aggression, he falls to counterpunchers a bit too easily, especially someone like Magomed Ankalaev, who's so methodical, has far better footwork, has a reach advantage as well, way more precise. Cutelaba's big game plan of playing possum is now understood by Ankalaev. It only works once. Playing possum is only going to work one time against the same opponent, right? So if he goes and does it again and tries to get Ankalaev to be aggressive and look for the knockout and open himself up, it's not going to work the second time. Ankalaev knows what to do. He might bait out one of those big power hands, make it look like he's going to be aggressive, and come under with a double leg takedown, because Cutelaba doesn't have the best takedown defense, especially against a single leg takedown, and Ankalaev is just generally a better wrestler and a better grappler. Not only did he show to be a bit superior on the feet when it comes to his technical ability, specifically precision counterpunching, but he had this whole aspect of the game that he didn't even show at all, which I do believe can also get him a win. So he has two different ways of winning this fight, to be honest: counterpunching and wrestling. The wrestling part, he showed none of it in the first fight, and I think he could go to it at any given time. He also has better cardio, which is another aspect of the game that we didn't get to see in the first fight. So my prediction for this fight, I do see Magomed Ankalaev dominating the fight in a sense, getting the TKO finish in the second round as Cutelaba is starting to get tired. And then we go to Alexander Volkov versus Walt Harris. Both fighters coming off a loss. Volkov lost to Curtis Blades, got a wrestle for the most part, and Walt Harris had a very good early start, but eventually got TKO'd by Alistair Overeem. In this fight most likely is going to be a striking match. If anything, Volkov might go for the takedown eventually because he has far better cardio. Walt Harris starts really gassing out even in the first round, which is pretty alarming going to a fight with a guy who can go through a decent 5-round fight at a pretty good pace for a heavyweight. Also, Volkov is just superior in the grappling department. Clear cut, generally speaking, throughout any given position. And he's far more technical on the feet, even though Walt Harris has the power advantage and he's extremely fast for a heavyweight. His hand speed is some of the fastest in the entire division. Might even be the fastest. That does correlate to his knockout ability, knockout power that you usually see, because he's able to catch the opponent when they don't expect any punches flying out. He whips his punches around guards, he whips his punches down the center, and the startup of the hooks and the straights, because they're so similar to each other, he flares out his elbow for both of them. It can really confuse the defense of his opponent if they're looking to guard, block, or parry, right? It's very similar to what you saw when Hamza Chimaev knocked out Gerald Meerschaert, where he flared his elbow out and it looked like he was going to throw a hook, but he landed a straight down the center, got right inside of the guard. That is stuff Walt Harris does as well, but he does it with greater hand speed and with long chain combinations. So what I'll say is, if he's able to get inside of Volkov ever, Volkov is going to be in huge trouble if the clinch doesn't get there in time. Right, Volkov does have the Thai plum. He's a little bit taller than Walt Harris, and he has super long legs, able to get his knee up very quickly. If he cannot get that out in time, and he's just looking to pull on those punches, he's going to get caught 100%. And that is going to be a huge problem for Volkov if he's not able to keep Walt Harris away with his kicks. And that's a huge thing for Volkov in this fight. Leg kicks, push kicks, side kicks, to disrupt the timing, disrupt the balance, and allow himself to move in specific intervals. Between every single kick, he's going to be able to get another angle on Walt Harris, and Harris cannot come down that straight line where he's very good at attacking from. Right, if you make Walt Harris keep changing directions, his output is a lot slower, and due to the focus on his defense that he has to do now, it's going to gas him out moment by moment in every single exchange, and that is where Volkov is most likely going to find his victory in this fight. It's a very hard fight to predict, to be honest, because again, if Walt gets on the inside, I do see him probably knocking out Volkov. But if Volkov plays his hand right, able to keep distance between them at all times, and get out of that first round, use a clinch to try to defend any close range exchanges between the two, then I definitely do see Volkov winning this fight. Because of the wrestling advantage, because of the grappling advantage, because of the cardio advantage, because of his better technique overall on the feet, and a very good game plan he can absolutely win by, I'm going to have to go Alexander Volkov in this fight. I'm going to go by a 3rd round TKO. And then we go to the co-main event. Robert Whittaker versus Jared Canonnier. The winner gets a title shot. It's a huge fight, a lot of stakes on it. Both fighters coming off a win, Whittaker beating Darren Till, Jared Cannonier coming off a few wins over Anderson Silva and Jack Hermanson, to name as some notable opponents of his. Absolutely bulldozed those two guys. I love this fight so much, and it might even be the most competitive fight on the entire card. Both are strikers by trade. Robert Whittaker is a karate fighter. Jared Cannonier is more of a, I won't say technical brawler, because he counters a lot more these days and he's a lot more methodical with his distance work, where he's getting a lot of these knockouts from the leg kick on Silva to the timing of the right uppercut counter on Hermanson. The Branch knockout was kind of a technical brawl of his, where he's able to catch Branch exiting off an angle with that big right overhand, even though Branch was moving away from the overhand, which is huge credit to Cannonier's power. But his wins in the heavyweight and light heavyweight division have shown his technical brawling skill. But in the middleweight division, he's a little bit different, man. He's a lot smarter these days, and everything he throws is to crush the opponent or break something. I mean, from leg kicks to counter punches to jabs. With anything this guy does, it looks like it has the ability to knock out the opponent or finish them. I'm gonna have to say this, even though Yoel Romero might be more powerful, he might be more explosive than Canonnier, Jared Cannonier is the most destructive striker that Robert Whittaker has ever fought in his entire career, and that even includes Yoel Romero. Romero is very wild, he's not super precise, he doesn't calculate things at the same kind of level that Cannonier does, right? Cannonier is not that far off with power, he might even be more powerful, we have no idea. He's finished everybody in the middleweight division. I mean, he was knocking out heavyweights left and right. So this is a different thing again. Whittaker just cannot catch a break when it comes to fighting these guys who have one-shot knockout power, and now he might be fighting the king of those powerhouses. And Whittaker doesn't have the best chin, right? He has, okay, so there's chin and there's heart. Whittaker has tremendous heart. He's a fighter with one of the greatest displays of heart I've ever seen of a fighter. Able to fight through multiple different injuries. When he does get knocked down, he's able to recover his way back intelligently enough to even start winning that round afterward and the next. But his chin, or should I say like his defense stat, and if you want to look at it at a video game aspect, is not that great. I mean, he gets dropped a lot, right? In the welterweight division, when you look at Stephen Thompson loss, got dropped multiple times in that fight, to his Yoel Romero wins, getting dropped in each of those fights, almost got finished off in the second fight, to getting knocked out twice by Israel Adesanya, to getting dropped by Darren Till. I mean, it feels like every single fight Whittaker is in, he's getting dropped. And that doesn't get better. Your ability to take a punch never gets better. It only gets worse if you keep getting hit. Cannonier, on the other hand, is rarely even getting hit clean at all. People are very hesitant on approaching him, even by wrestling these days. When you look at what happened to Jack Hermanson, I understand Whittaker is a better wrestler. Whittaker has very underrated wrestling, especially when you showed in the Darren Till fight, maybe not getting it to the ground necessarily, but using it to get in close through the complicated footwork of Darren Till and trying to line up some strikes from his wrestling, right? That's the first time we've seen it from Whittaker. So it's not like we anticipated some, elite Olympic level wrestler all of a sudden from Whittaker when he's never showed it before. That fight, because it was somewhat successful of getting in close as well as getting some strikes off on Darren Till, I do think in this fight, he has to go by it. He has to use his wrestling, and it's going to be better than ever before. He got the feeling of it in his first high-level MMA fight. It felt pretty good for him against Canonnier, who doesn't have the same wrestling defense that Darren Till does, not even close to be honest. I think Whittaker's wrestling can prove to be extremely strong in this fight, as long as he doesn't get countered for it. Like I just said about Jack Hermanson. Hermanson is a pretty good wrestler. Hermanson has some decent takedowns and very lethal on the ground. Cannonier was so confident against this wrestling aspect, he was able to time an uppercut, perfect picture uppercut, and finish off Jack Hermanson because of it. Hermanson ran into an uppercut. He never saw it coming. It can happen the same thing to Whittaker, because Whittaker, for some reason, doesn't set up anything he does anymore. In his most recent fights, his last two, maybe even a little bit of the Yoel Romero rematch, he has shown this different approach where he's like a lot more blitzing without many setups, to be honest, without any of those stutter steps he used to go by and switch some angles, slight angles, in front of his opponent to trick them before he attacks. He's now just winging overhand rights from a very far distance, and if he does that against Jared Cannonier, he's going to get knocked out. He's going to get finished off. He's going to get countered. He's going to run into the brick wall, because that's what Cannonier waits for. He's extremely patient. He's pressuring but he stalks you with this waiting game of you to expose yourself. What he's doing is he throws a jab here and there. He throws a very quick leg kick here and there, and he's breaking your rhythm every single time he attacks, because of the amount of power he's able to generate behind everything he throws. Even not 100% power, his opponents just back up. It almost looks like they're getting in car crashes when Canonnier is just throwing jabs and leg kicks at him, right? So they have to get something off on him. They have to get out of this uncomfortable position against the cage, and they have to start pushing him back. And that's where he starts to look for those counter shots with tremendous precision, right? And this is why you look at the stats of Jared Canonnier. Now, stats, again, I'm gonna have to probably say it every single time. Stats don't tell you the whole story, but look at his significant strike stats. From 3.62 significant strikes landed per minute. That's not that high, right? Maybe even a little bit below average. We look at that, but then you look at his accuracy and defense. Look how high those stats are for the low amount of strikes he throws. That tells you right there, this is true about Jared Canonnier. Those numbers tell you a true story about Canonnier's fights. He doesn't get hit clean because opponents don't set up on him. They're very hesitant about the power, so they wing stuff out there. He's able to block it, pull on it, and counter, and that's where you see the accuracy 51% coming from, which is actually very high. So my prediction for this fight, I am going to go with Jared Canonnier. It is a 3-round fight, so I don't see Canonnier gassing out in the fight. We haven't really seen him go 3 rounds in a fast pace in the middleweight division yet. So it being 3 rounds against such a powerhouse, Whittaker is not going to have that much time to adapt in the fight and recover and come back and all that stuff. It does give Jared Canonnier a lot more chances of winning the rounds due to, getting 1 knockdown in a round or something. If he gets 1 knockdown in a round, he's going to win those rounds, even if he's getting outstruck. So that in itself can make Whittaker a little bit more hesitant than ever before, because he cannot lose rounds by engaging without setting anything up. And that's the thing here, man. If Whittaker sets things up, if he uses his starter steps and uses his angles, he uses the high kicks, feints jabs on the initial blitz to get the opponent to defend up high, goes to the body and stuff like that with a push kick or even a round kick, goes to the leg instead, uses the vulnerability of his feints to really open up his opponent. If he starts doing stuff like that like he used to against Jacare Souza and Romero the first time, I can absolutely see Whittaker winning the fight. I might even favor him to win. But we go by what we've seen recently. Against Darren Till, against Adesanya, and against Romero too, I think if that Whittaker comes into this fight against Canonnier, he's going to get dropped eventually. Even if he's starting to win due to having a little bit more output, landing leg kicks and stuff like that, getting in and out, using his speed, I eventually see him just getting caught. He's going to run into something like always. It's almost like a trend for him these days. He's doing well, but then he runs into a strike, which he shouldn't have. He gets a little bit antsy to deliver some power and get the knockout. Against Canonnier, he can't really do that easily. But there is an X factor going that Canonnier hasn't fought in a pretty long time, and that is what makes this fight way harder to predict than initially thought. So I'm going to go with Jared Canonnier. I could absolutely be wrong on this, and I'm going to go by a 2nd round knockout. Not even TKO, knockout. And then we go to the main event. One of the most anticipated high-profile fights in probably UFC history, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje, champion versus champion. And yes, beating Tony Ferguson for the interim belt, I do see you as some kind of champion, or at least champion status, because you beat one of the best fighters in the UFC across all weight classes. And the way he did it, the way Justin Gaethje absolutely dismantled Tony Ferguson like no one's ever done even close before, yeah, Justin Gaethje is legitimate a champion. I'm going to see him as that. But Khabib is a different level champion, 28-0, never lost, has lost 1 round in his entire career. I mean, when you talk about a guy who has won 39 out of 40 rounds in MMA, unofficially 56 out of 57, when you include all of those 2-round fights in Russia, Khabib is a legendary fighter. And he brings the most dominant wrestling and grappling we've ever seen in the sport. And that is where Justin Gaethje hasn't showed too much of in World Series of Fighting and the UFC. Early on he did. Early on he was wrestling a lot. But when he became champion in World Series of Fighting and when he got into the UFC, he's hardly ever showed it, right? And that is what counts. We understand early in his career, we can see stuff here and there, but how does it translate when you're fighting Khabib in the UFC, right? If you haven't shown that kind of wrestling at the UFC level, man, I don't know how he's able to utilize what he knows, utilize his background in folk style wrestling at such a high level in MMA, right? So Khabib, we can say, has the wrestling and grappling advantage. Justin Gaethje has a striking advantage for the most part, right? If Gaethje comes out there with no audience, to influence him in any way to get into a brawl with Khabib or something like that, which will get him taken to the ground. If he starts being very methodical like his last few fights, using his footwork, using his ability to create distance at every given moment, and land with the counter punches that you saw against Cerrone and you saw against Tony Ferguson consistently throughout that fight, just mere back steps into right-hand counters, back steps into right-hand left hook follow-ups, back steps into uppercuts in case Khabib wants to shoot in for the takedown. The footwork of Gaethje is going to be the biggest problem for Khabib. Right? This is a different level of footwork that Khabib's ever fought against before. I understand Barboza and Michael Johnson and Conor McGregor all have good footwork, right? Conor really didn't show it. He was plotting in front of Khabib the entire fight. Michael Johnson did. Michael Johnson was moving in and out, but Khabib was doing it as well because he knew that's what Michael Johnson would come in with. He'll come in with that jab, left straight from a far distance and move out away from it, right? So Khabib had to do a very similar thing to match the pattern and match the rhythm so he cannot get caught slipping pretty much, right? But Khabib has underrated footwork as well. People really overlook it. Watch that Michael Johnson fight. Every single time Michael Johnson threw a punch and threw something at Khabib, Khabib only took like a half step backwards. He didn't give Michael Johnson a lot of ground to push him back because Khabib does his best work when he's pushing you back. When he's against the cage, he's an entirely different fighter. He's so less effective and efficient in a fight when his back is closer to the cage than his opponent's back is. He gets a lot more frantic, he gets a lot more desperate, his takedowns get a lot easier to see, and he wings punches out. And I understand Gaethje has great footwork, but Gaethje has been showing great footwork more so on the defense, more so moving away, not moving forward, right? A lot of it's counter punching, but how much is the counter punching going to really be effective in this kind of fight against Khabib? Khabib, yes, he throws big winging overhand rights at very great speeds, and he throws that eagle punch of his when he's faking for the takedown. Yes, then the counter punching is going to work, but Khabib is not going to stay on the feet that long, right? Especially in the first round. In the first round, he wants to get you to the ground so he could start gassing you out, so he could start striking with you a little bit later. And now because the opponent felt the takedown early in the second, third, fourth, and fifth, they're a lot more hesitant on doing anything against him because they're afraid of the takedown. They're afraid of feeling him again. And it allows Khabib to strike with him a little bit more in every single round. This is why you saw in the Iaquinta fight, for an example, he was striking so much in the third and fourth rounds. He had no worry about El Iaquinta's punching power. But in the first round, he definitely did. He changes opponents mid-fight. That is something we've never seen from Justin Gaethje yet. We've never seen someone change him during a fight. He's always been a consistent fighter in each specific individual fight. He brawled it entirely out with Michael Johnson, right? He brawled it entirely out with Eddie Alvarez, even getting rocked himself plenty of times. Dustin Poirier, similar kind of thing. Against Tony Ferguson, he was methodical in countering consistently. He's a very consistent fighter, and that goes into his mindset, man. The guy has an unbreakable mind, unbreakable will. He does not get away of what he wants to do. If anybody can probably do it to a sense, it's Khabib gassing Justin Gaethje out due to the wrestling. And that is where it all comes, I think, falling down for Justin Gaethje, to be honest. I've made a couple videos about this. Khabib just has a different style of wrestling that Justin Gaethje's never fought up against before, right? He may have trained against and sparred against a few times here and there, but it's never been a normality for him to consistently fight this Dagestani wrestling style, this Russian wrestling style, which is entirely different from what you learned in America. Khabib has come to America from Russia, and he trained with AKA. He's trained with Daniel Cormier, Olympic-level wrestlers, collegiate-level wrestlers on a daily basis for multiple years, right? That is something Justin Gaethje has not done, vice versa. I mean, Gaethje literally said that he's only training wrestling twice a week for this training camp, and that has to play a huge aspect on your experience to fight a certain style of wrestler that you've never done before. Justin Gaethje is an explosive wrestler. His way of winning wrestling matches in college was just defending takedowns explosively to eventually win on points. But Khabib is not that kind of explosive wrestler. He's not that kind of a guy who's going to meet Justin Gaethje in the way he knows how to wrestle, right? He's a very hanging on, clinging on, grip on all times, never letting go, just strength and endurance kind of wrestler that Justin Gaethje's not used to going up against, with a very different method of taking you down, even stemming from his judo background, which is something a lot of people aren't even talking about. If Gaethje is starting to defend some of the more quote-unquote folk style and freestyle wrestling attacks from Khabib, what's stopping Khabib from transitioning right into a judo aspect of throw to take away the balance of what Justin Gaethje is trying to defend as an quote-unquote American freestyle or full style of a takedown? Right? It completely throws you off your entire game. And Khabib has shown some glimpses of this early on in his fights. If I do remember correctly, he did show this against Rafa Dos Anjos. Remember that trip and throw that he hit Dos Anjos with? That is stuff we don't see that often from Khabib, but Khabib is a black belt in judo, and it 100% matters in the clinch, right? This is something Justin Gaethje doesn't have near the kind of experience that Khabib has, right? If Khabib is wrestling and training and sparring against similar wrestling styles to Justin Gaethje, while Justin Gaethje has probably, uncommonly or occasionally wrestled against similar styles to Khabib his entire, 26, 27 years in combat sports, it's going to make a huge difference. And why in this specific fight is going to make a huge difference for Justin Gaethje. It's what I said in the beginning. Justin Gaethje rarely ever uses his wrestling. So if he goes and wrestles with Khabib, defensively more so, I know he's been wrestling a lot in the gym throughout his entire MMA career, but in a fight with strikes actually trying to knock you out, with takedowns actually trying to hurt you, submissions trying to hurt you, all this stuff, a lot more lethal intent in everything that happens, Gaethje is going to go to a point where he gets a little bit tired, where he starts relying on his muscle memory dating back to his collegiate days. dating back to early on in his MMA career, where at those times, I'm pretty sure he hasn't wrestled against anything like Khabib ever. Training room, sparring, fights, nothing. Ever. So the muscle memory is lacking this Russian wrestling and grappling style completely. That is ultimately why I'm going to lean more towards Khabib's side. To be honest, I can even see Khabib landing some good punches on Justin Gaethje after he gets Gaethje tired. I could see overhand rights and some of the explosiveness in his strikes to catch Gaethje when he's trying to brawl out a little bit more, trying to force out some physical damage on Khabib. My official prediction, I'm going to go with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I'm going to go by a 4th round submission. And man, with so many good fights on this card, and to be honest, I do agree with a lot of the betting odds, this is a great card to go and bet on the fights with mybookie.ag. The best lines and the best ways to bet on the fights. And you got everything on UFC 254, from a pick'em fight between Canonnier and Robert Whittaker to a huge favorite in Khabib, a bit more than I think he should be. Same thing with Phil Haas versus Jacob Malkoun, and another pick'em fight with Stefan Struve versus Tai Tuivasa. There's a lot going on throughout this entire card when you look at the betting odds. It's either a pick'em fight or a big favorite, big underdog. And man, that gives you a huge opportunity when you go and bet with a parlay. Just pick a group of fighters that you are confident in winning, and you can multiply your earnings big time. There's so many things you could bet on with mybookie.ag, from presidential debates to the other sports organizations that are finally coming back, and the odds are always changing. Literally an hour ago, these pick'em fights that you see were not pick'em fights, so it's best to get to them quick. And all you gotta do is go to mybookie.ag and sign up for the deposit bonus, where MyBookie will double your first deposit all the way up to $1,000. That means you deposit $100, you get another $100 in free money to play with. Just use the promo code WEASEL to activate this offer. That's promo code WEASLE to activate MyBookie's sign up offer this winning season. Sign up with mybookie.ag today, where you bet, you win, and when you win, you get paid. And man, like I was just talking about, I agree with almost every single fight on the betting lines. Whittaker versus Canonnier, I don't think it's a pick'em fight. I do lean Canonnier, even though Whittaker can find ways to win that fight. I think Canonnier should be the favorite. And even though I do think that Khabib is going to defeat Justin Gaethje, a minus 350 is a bit too much in my opinion. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions. If you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.